Hi, Shiur. Okay, so we're just talking. All we've said tonight so far is that Iyov has great virtues. He's looking out for people, for the orphans, for the widows, as the Gemara fills in some of the backstory, and clearly a complex person. And I left off saying, who's not a complicated person. Certainly nobody who I'm looking at right now we're all complicated. Right? Anybody who's been to a derech banquet at the end of the year, wow, what comes out. So, and we saw it, and I was about to make an observation that Iyov's afflictions now are quite physical. They've hit him from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. I don't know how many of us have actually suffered physical pain, disease, or other kinds of temporary or more permanent kinds of afflictions. A lot of the time when you're suffering, it's localized. So there's a sense almost in the individual who suffers that there's another part of the body that at least has respite. I'm reminded of an old Peanuts comic strip, Charlie Brown and Snoopy, where maybe it's Linus who stubs his toe, and Lucy, of course, always with the solutions. She's the go-to doctor in the Peanuts gang. So when Linus is reeling from pain from having stubbed his toe, Lucy goes over to him and assesses the situation and winds back and gives him a big sock right in the chin. And he screams, of course, "Ow! What was that for?" And she said, "I was trying to help you forget the pain in your toe," but she succeeded. So, sometimes, when you have one localized pain, it tends to obscure another one. But in Iyov's case, there's no respite, right? It's head to toe, quite literally. So he's in agony, and it must be an emotional agony, and it's certainly a physical agony. And what would you be feeling right now if you were in his particular position? And I think we're meant to. I mean, as we've indicated in some of the approaches to Iyov, that he has this universal kind of equality. And if you see yourself, if you can, in his experience, if you can identify with the tribulations of Iyov, what would we say? What would we do? Now, one figure who's been conspicuously absent from all of the action is, of course, Mrs. Iyov, who comes to us without a name. And what's her role? Right? How does she play into the narrative precisely? So we meet her now. If you open up your Iyov, we're in the second chapter now, and the 9th verse. That's where we left off. No, the 9th verse. Okay. In the 8th verse, you might recall, we see that Iyov is in agony, he's writhing. He took some potsherd to scrape himself as he sat in ashes. Rubbing apparently offered him some kind of mild relief from his sores, which is shrin. Shrin is usually translated as some kind of boils, but probably not unlike the shrin, the makos in Mitzrayim. These were supernatural, so I don't imagine he's going to find too much comfort. Now, his wife comes in Pasuk 9, Tess. She said, and his wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your unquestioning integrity? Blaspheme Hashem and die." Well, now, there's quite a woman.
The ideal.
Right, she certainly makes quite an entrance.
Hey, she might be the best wife you've ever had.
Say it again.
She might be the best wife he's ever had.
Yeah, could be. He responds. He said to her, Pasuk 10, "You talk as any senseless woman might talk. Should we accept such good from Hashem and not accept evil? For all that Iyov did, Iyov did not sin by his mouth." Okay, we'll stop with these 3 psukim. There's a lot to consider there. Before I jump in, as I tend to do and dominate, anybody want to make an observation, any question, any detail that cries out, as Rashi always says, darsheni? You know that language in Rashi? Rashi says sometimes the
Jobs,
verse.
Right?
Say it again.
This is the book of Job, right?
Job. Job, as it's pronounced in English weirdly, and Iyov, as his original name actually was. And
I can't find it on LinkedIn.
It's a bit intense. His wife is literally telling him to die.
What? Where is that on LinkedIn? Eh?
Yeah. She. I'm turning the conversation back, Yoel. Thanks for the comic interview.
I have to do at least once, Rabbi.
No, they could do more. Right. So she. Ari, what are you saying? Ari Swift.
It's a bit intense. His wife, like, it's one thing to be like, curse Hashem, look at all he's doing to you. It's another one to be like, die.
Right. What she says is appalling.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Keep in mind that we don't really see what she was like before she lost all of her children and money.
Right. She's also going through quite an ordeal.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Don't Chazal also teach us that the first time we see someone tells us a lot about them?
Don't know if that's an absolute. I don't know if the rule necessarily always follows that way. Certainly, how they appear, every detail. When you're learning text, we're not learning literature here. The psukim are as significant in what they are telling us as much as what they're not telling us. And the fact that we're just meeting her now, and that actually we're not going to be seeing her at all from this point. This is the only introduction we get to Iyov's wife. The fact that she's nameless, that also brings some kind of, that kind of alerts us to something here. She doesn't seem to have much, her personal experience is not considered in any great way. She's presented purely vis-a-vis, she's a foil, or she's there to counteract Iyov. You wonder about the shidduch though, because I mean her simple message, curse Hashem, in a sense, is everything that up until now Iyov is standing against, and now he's, unlike probably most of humanity, he's actually passed his test with flying colors, and she's just had it with him. That's what it sounds like.
If I may make an insight.
Yeah. What do you have, Dovi?
Right, so it does seem very similar to the kind of speaking that the Satan had been giving Iyov the entirety of the time, along with something that you had said before. Two things. The first thing was that there was some sort of comment.
You know what, Dovi? Go back for a second. I didn't follow your first insight. What do you mean?
Hold on. The first insight I had
Why
said
does she seem like Satan exactly?
Right. I'm going to explain it in the next two.
Oh, fine. Okay, I'll let you go.
Yeah. Okay, so the first thing was that you had said that the trail of like the Satan is first he's a guest, or sorry,
first he's a traveler, then a guest, and then he becomes the man.
Right. So I have a feeling that this is the becoming the man, but in this case it would be the wife, where it's like a interpret. I mean, that's a pretty heavy jump. But
it's an interesting observation. I don't recall seeing anybody who goes that way, but it's very insightful. Yeah, in a sense. I mean, she certainly is she's what the Satan has been hoping Iyov would have done. She's doing exactly what Satan his agenda is called for, so that maybe he's manifesting in the guise of the wife. It's a very compelling idea.
Right.
Yeah, keep going.
The second one was that you had mentioned that some commentator had said that.
You know what? I want to riff off that first one before you go on. You'll remember this next comment? Yeah, so there's another striking parallel here. If indeed she, like a Sata, remember Sata is to incite, to deviate, to cause us to deviate. Well, then there's an unmistakable parallel here in someplace else in Tanakh. Anybody else have this association?
I was thinking Chava.
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty unsubtle here, right? Chava coming and inciting Adam to sin, right? At the guise of the Satan, no less. Dovi, I don't know if that's where you were going, but that would be a very powerful connection to make.
Right. I do want to get to
Okay,
this.
what do you want? What's the other piece you
The
wanted to
second
say?
one, you had said that some commentator had said that it was saying something about the pain that Iyov was going through, and that it wasn't actually Iyov, the Satan was in pain, because, as you had said, that
No, that's not
uh,
precise. Let me clarify what the Gemara had said. The Gemara had said that Satan's pain was actually greater than Iyov's. Not that he had taken any of Iyov's, and not that they were really experiencing the same thing, but simply the idea that as difficult a time that Iyov is having, it was even harder for Satan to somehow afflict Iyov without killing him.
right. So in the pasuk it says, blaspheme Hashem and die, kind of making me think that the Satan wants him to die. Just get it over with.
Right?
That's what I thought of.
That's the statement. I don't recall we've quoted it yet in this series, but the Gemara says in Kiddushin that the Yetzer Hara, who we've seen as synonymous with the Satan, the Yetzer Hara every day tries to gets up and attempts to kill us, nothing less. And so another very, very perceptive observation. Right, and she's saying just as much. How does the Yetzer Hara try to kill us? It turns us into zombies. We acquire all kinds of bad qualities. We stare into these phones endlessly, right? That's a quasi-death. Of course, when people are consumed with their Yetzer Hara, they're not fully living anyway. And we developed self-destructive tendencies. It's all the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is death-affirming. And of course, Hainu Malach HaMavis, that's where he wants to take us.
So
we
we
resist. Yeah, go ahead, Eitan.
Rabbi, please continue. I'll say afterwards.
We resist, and we see Iyov valiantly resisting. I don't know exactly what it must have been to have such a dialogue with your wife after experiencing together such tragedy, such grief, where she reacts in one almost polar opposite way, and he refuses to go her direction, or at least that's what it seems like. There's actually something else we're going to pick up in one of these psukim that is things are not quite what they appear, as Chazal will say.
Rabbi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
Why wasn't his wife mentioned before? Like when his children were mentioned and his fortune was mentioned.
Good question. We don't know.
Maybe
Assuming
it's not.
Remember, we saw there are a few different possible authors of Sefer Iyov. The most accepted is that it's written by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe's motivation, he wants to give us the details that matter in the discussion that we're having. Anything that's relevant to suffering and pain and how do you deal with the world when we don't understand the world. So evidently she's not been a player up until now. Eitan, you're going to say something?
Yeah, 2 points. One is, we tried comparing the Iyov's wife to Chava, but it seems more that Iyov's wife is more like the Nachash with Chava, that the Nachash was definitely more of a player in trying to convince Chava to do the Chet. Instead, especially since a lot of Mepharshim, talk about how Adam either knew, and because Chava was his wife, that he went along with it, or it doesn't seem like Chava really. It doesn't. I know there's some that say that she did, but I don't know. But that was just.
Well, it's not a perfect parallel, but just consider that how similar. Just this alone, the fact that the Satan aggravates us, gets under our skin quite literally. He clearly has done whatever. He's agitated her successfully. And she now, almost as a separate agent, is coming to her husband and trying to do much the same. In a sense, she's an agent doing the Satan's work for him. Well, Chava, who could resist a woman's tears? That's how she gets Adam to eat from the fruit.
Right. And then the second.
You're right. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's certainly ripe for thought. I mean, it's something that we can come back to and try to consider how meaningful that is. What was your second insight?
My second one was why doesn't the Sutton? I mean, Sutton takes all of Eov's children. Why not his wife as well?
Excellent question. I'm going to address it. I'm going to address it shortly. All right. Let me give you a little bit by way of some of the Mefarshim. The Malbim. If you have questions about any of these figures, the Malbim, for example, was a great Rav in the 19th century who really unlocked the secrets of Tanakh to the modern mind. He was one of the early courageous Rabbanim who took on the Enlightenment. Although he himself was very qualified, he read a lot of the Enlightened works and so could respond to them on their own level. Had a hard life, held 15 different jobs before he ultimately died on his way to the last. Was a candidate for the post of Chief Rabbi of America and very wisely turned it down. The one who did accept it, Rav Yaakov Yosef, the job killed him. And we've never had a Chief Rabbi since in the United States. Anyway, the Malbim, who has always the most acute observations in any given work, he says like this. He says his wife had seen that he was smitten, and she's particularly, I mean, what moves her, and maybe this is addressing your question, Aaron Reich, what moves her, she hasn't spoken up until now. So, okay, maybe she also really was on the same page as Iyov, what we call being Makabel Yisurim, this great quality of somebody who's capable of accepting whatever Hashem sends, accepting the suffering, and handling it gracefully, something that really is a high value. And we haven't heard from her. Maybe we can understand that she was on that level. But look, he said all those beautiful things at the end of the first chapter. And even so now he's smitten all over again, meaning none of that helped. If anything, it seemed like he's getting punished for what she now could perceive as his frumkeit. And the Malbim says she's got actually a real live concern here. She says if he is Makabel and Mr. like frumkeit all over again, it might get really worse. I mean, maybe I'm next, she might be thinking. Not unreasonably, as many of you are asking, how come she's still around? If the kids are all gone, well, maybe she's next. So, maybe she says the jig is up, and I kind of scared to be in your orbit, honey. That's the Malbim's take. I'm adding a little literary license, but not too much. There's another pshat, Reb Zachariah, who says she represents the Yetzer Hara. Dovi was on that track. So that, and this is elaborated in the Art Scrolls commentary, Rav Eisenman says, as Iyov is striving really with all of his energies, quite valiantly to maintain his integrity, so now she attempts to deal the final blow. And what is that? She's essentially abandoning him, in her words. She says, I am not with you one bit. And indeed, we don't see her after this. And so, in a sense, he loses her, and the loss here is not coming through some kind of divine channel. There's no catastrophe that destroys the sheep, and there's no walls falling in and the children. Here's something, not only is you have a woman who appears to be leaving on her own through her own volition, but she's doing though because of Iyov's behavior. So now you have the idea that, maybe I am responsible for my own miserable fate. And that in itself only adds salt on the wound. It's one thing if we feel that, okay, this is what Hashem has dealt me, I don't really get it, and I'll just accept whatever comes my way. It's another thing altogether when you feel, I really deserve this. So, this idea now that he's in agony, but now that he has to do it, he's going to be doing it all alone, that should make his suffering complete. There is a source, and I really can't resist. I really shouldn't do it in this context, but it's too good not to mention, that wonders also aloud, why doesn't she die? So the source is a certain Augustine, but he's from a different religion. They call him saint, but we don't. In any case, this Augustine writing over well over 1,000 years ago, 1,000 and a few hundred years ago, he opined the following. The fact that she doesn't die, that's part of the punishment. Oh, come on. Somebody's got to get that. It's too hilarious to be true. I mean, he wrote it with one presumes a straight face. but it's hilarious, right?
Because she's that much of a.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's not exactly the most attractive character that we've seen. Yeah. I mean, what's the old Rodney Dangerfield line? He said, take my wife. I mean, really, take my wife. Go, take her. Yeah. Right. So, like, the fact that she doesn't die, that's the punishment. Okay. Back to a more serious reckoning here. The Malbim interprets her words as sarcastic and also heretical. What she's saying essentially is Iyov had blessed Hashem. He understands that everything comes from Hashem. It's all good. We don't deserve a thing, and whatever he brings, we accept, and we're grateful, and we don't expect more. And he says, if he blesses again, well, then the next logical sequence would be that Hashem's going to kill him. And that's what she's saying. Blaspheme Hashem, and you're going to die anyway. It's striking here. The Malbim notices something else. If you look at Iyov's words, it's the first time that he doesn't refer to Hashem in the Yud Kei Vav Kei. He refers to him as Elokim. What is the basic difference between the words?
Elohim refers to master.
One more time.
Din versus Rachamim.
Din versus Rachamim. Right? Hashem is the personal. He's Hu Haya Hu Aveh Hu Yeh. He's eternal, and of course he's the Midas of Rachamim, the compassionate quality. And Elokim is the one who punishes. Is the quality of punishment. You remember we talked about this must have been, as the Maharal's insight, this must have been a time of great Midas Adin for such a series of events to take place. And so we understand that Iyov, on some level, is starting to perceive this himself. Yeah. It's striking. Much is going through my mind. It's such a stimulating book, and it leads to so many different discussions. I don't know if you're tracking this, but unlike many of the other Sfarim in Tanakh, it seems that almost everybody's involved in this discussion. I mean, we're able to quote such a wide host of different authorities over the ages. I mean, the Maharal comes in, who's not necessarily considered one of the classic commentators on Tanakh. We're going to see Rambam is going to be centrally involved in the interpretation. Iyov is endlessly stimulating. Iyov, the first time he said it was a bracha. This time, now look at Iyov's words. They have a different nuance. Now he's not so much blessing Hashem. He's really just trying to explain to her, maybe explain to himself, and provide kind of a logical background. He asks it as a rhetorical question, but there is an implication maybe at this point that in Iyov's seemingly undauntable exterior, cracks are appearing. That somehow he's starting to get plagued with some doubts and maybe some stoicism, right? A certain sense. Come on, you can't change the world. This is the way it is. He's telling her with resounding confidence, trying to make the words stick, but you get the implication, you get the feeling maybe that you can't change things as they are. Wouldn't it be nice if you could?
Yeah, Rob, to add to that, I was thinking kind of a similar thing because the last sentence of verse 10, it says, for all that, Job said nothing sinful, Iyov said nothing sinful, but that's also saying that he didn't say anything positive.
Oh, excellent. Really, very sharp. Right. So, like, he's, at this point, there's nothing positive per se. He's just not necessarily doing anything negative, which is a come down for Iyov. Right. And again, there's a lot of subtext here, a lot that's not being said, but there's a sense that wouldn't it be nice if things didn't quite work out this way? I don't know if you've ever studied Hilchos Avelus in the Shulchan Aruch, but there's certain guidelines in terms of Nichum Avelim, what you're supposed to say and do when you go and pay a Shiva call. If anybody hasn't had a chance, a Rabbi Pittem lost his father, and it's still within 30 days. His father died of the coronavirus. And if you have a connection with him, certainly you can be in touch and still be menachem. Say, "Amakum menachem eschem." I suggested to our students that are in yeshiva that they do that, and I had to coach them a little bit because most of them don't really know how to say the line. It's on page 800 in your friendly art scroll. You can just open it up and find it. And I heard how meaningful it was. But right, the sense anyway in Hilchos Avelus, the Rama points out there's a lot of mistakes that people make, and sometimes with the best of intentions. Famously the halacha: you go over, you sit, you bring food, you don't say anything, and potentially you might not say anything the entire time because it's possible the avel, the mourner, doesn't want to speak, and that's the mourner's prerogative. So you sit there to be a presence. But of course, if they want to speak, you can, and the whole discussion should be around them and whatever's appropriate. You want to talk about the deceased, fine. You can't say certain things. And one of the things the Ramah says you're not allowed to say, even though your purpose is to comfort the mourner, you're not allowed to say, well, you can't imply somehow, well, this is the fate as Hashem sent it to you, and it's really okay. You can't really change the past. Because saying something like that implies that, wouldn't it be great if we could change the past? I mean, it'd be terrific if we could bring back the deceased. Because on some level, you're calling into question what Hashem decreed. I mean, once a person dies, we understand that's final, and our job is to accept. And then to imply that somehow we're not living in a world of a just creator is a kind of kfira. And that's, again, kind of lurking beneath the surface. It's not explicit. This pasuk, let's focus on it. It says, again, we said, and Eden, it's going to go very much in your direction, but it's a slightly different diuk. B'cholzos, verse 10, lo chata Iyov b'svasav, and all of this, and what does he face? He's faced almost everything now, even the antagonism of his wife. And all of this, Iyov did not sin with his lips. So the Gemara Baba Basra makes the obvious diuk. I'm sure some of you must have heard this, or I've almost implied it in my reading. Aval chata b'libo. He may not have sinned with his lips, but he's roiling beneath the surface. All kinds of unutterable ideas are now in his heart. Things he shouldn't say, but he wants to. And here's what's suggested by that Gemara. What's he thinking right now? His new line of thinking, and he's going to go through many different shifts philosophically, and trying to understand, come to terms with the nature of suffering in this world. He's understanding that Hashem created tzaddikim, he created Rishaim, and people's nature is divinely decreed. That's the direction he's going, and we're going to come back to this. But it's almost like, you hear this today. What's the expression that people say? If I'm not mistaken, there's a pop song. I know it was quoted to me a couple years ago. Hashem made me this way. Probably talking about something else, but this is the modern ethos. I can't be faulted for my Yetzer Hara. This is who I am, and Hashem wants me to be this way, whatever this is. And that sense of, it's a stoic attitude, a passive attitude, and one that it's also passive aggressive, because it's almost saying, it's your fault, Hashem, so I'm just going to act out on it. So we're starting to hear early inklings of some bad spirit in Iyov's, and again, the cracks that are starting to come out. I'm going to point this out now. It's a terribly important idea, and we'll come back to it later as well. There's a concept we learned from Iyov, and we should all take comfort in it. And it's as follows. I'm going to quote it in Hebrew because it's one of these phrases that you want to just have to use in your discussion with people. This will come up. All of us will, presumably, if we're alive, we will encounter our own difficulties with our own lives or other people's lives. So here's a principle that the Gemara says. It says, Ein Adam Nitpas. Ein Adam Nitpas. I just lost my notes. Give me a second. Let's say it properly. Ein Adam Nitpas b'shas tzaro. A person is not caught at the time of his affliction. Meaning we're not held accountable when we're in extremists, when we're under duress, and bad things come out. Shem realizes it. He takes it in context. He realizes, okay, I see. It's not really what it appears to be. So Shem cuts us some slack, in other words, and gives us a little bit of benefit. I mean, which is not to say that we're completely off the hook. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to count. We're accountable for everything, and of course, the converse is true. People who are pushed to the limit and under extreme situations, who rise to it even better than Iyov does at the end of the first chapter, well, their reward is immense. I mean, we understand life on some level is a series of tests that we're meant to rise to. It's an obstacle course. And so we do our best. And some do better than others. Evidently, Iyov is not quite the pristine tzaddik that we initially understood him to be.
Sorry, Rabbi.
Again,
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
But doesn't that concept go against the whole Iyov story? He's
How
in
so?
extreme because he's put in extreme suffering essentially the whole time. So how can he be held accountable?
So what? Yeah, I'm not following. So go ahead.
So how can he be held accountable for anything that he says or does?
We're all accountable. You can't use an excuse and say, well, I was suffering, so it's not my fault. I mean, insofar as we're in possession of our wits and our faculties, we're expected to rise to whatever challenges Hashem sends us. I mean, this has been sort of lurking beneath the surface, but it needs to be said. Chazal understand that nobody receives a challenge, an affliction, that he doesn't have at least the potential to rise to. Often we don't. Often we actually respond deplorably to our various suffering, our various tribulations. But it didn't mean that it wasn't inevitable. We could have risen to it. Apparently we have the resources. And so you're right, Eden. Okay, he's in extreme circumstances. And as we just saw it with this idea of Ein Adam Nitmas B'Shas Tzaro, the person's not caught up because in his time of grief. What that means is Hashem sees, okay, I understand. You didn't mean it. It was a. How we say to people, oh, I understood. I forgive you. You were just speaking in a time of anger. So Hashem is almost giving us that kind of leeway. But that doesn't mean that we're faultless. And we have the potential maybe to be better. As we say, there's such a high level of never succumbing to tsar. Some of my favorite stories, they come up a lot. Everybody here knows Rabbi Samet. Do you remember the story when he's walking outside with another derech alum, and they're deeply engrossed in Divrei Torah. Rabbi Samet is talking, and a child on a bike who wasn't looking, quite thoughtlessly zips by and knocks Rabbi Samet over. I mean, just flat on his back. Anybody remember this story? Yeah. So the student told me the story afterwards. Rav Samet would never talk about himself in flattering terms, but apparently Rabbi Samet got up. The kid was absolutely beside himself. What did he just do? He knocked this elderly tzaddik over. Rabbi Samet, for his part, was almost unfazed. He gets up, simply dusts himself off, and picks up in the middle of the sentence and goes on. And they're right back to the Dvar Torah, as if nothing happened. Now, I mean, at least what most of us mere mortals would have done, people not in the stratosphere of Rabbi Samet, but what most of us would have probably done is given the kid a piece of our mind, and we wouldn't be off for doing so. Come on, don't be so thoughtless. Don't you realize people are walking here? Look next time, kid. Right? Something. Right? But in this case, my student said, you didn't have to say that. I mean, look at the kid's face. All you had to do is you look at him and you realize he knows he did something wrong. The act was a rebuke enough for the child. And so Rav Samet was, okay, I'm okay with this. I overheard a couple of derech students this morning learning Musar, and they were dancing around one of these old problems of anger management when it comes to difficult people. And one of them, who's not holding on such a high level, in many ways, certainly not in Midos, but he was struggling with this. He said, come on. I mean, if somebody's going to anger me, I'm going to blow up, and he deserves it. So the Shadow Base student, who has a little more experience and knowledge, was trying to convey to him that you put it in perspective, and you're not supposed to let it get you, and anger is such a problem. I couldn't help but say, do you mind if I interject a little bit? And I pointed out, I said, if you really deeply see that Hashem, if God is in your life in a meaningful way, you understand that every circumstance that we face, Hashem obviously willed it, feels that it's appropriate for us, is usually testing us, and our only real recourse is to respond gracefully. In which case, and I recognize my disclaimer on this is difficult. It's so easy to talk about and so difficult to put into practice in life. But if you do, you'll realize you will never be angry, frustrated, impatient, or any of the other long list of bad qualities, especially with regards to other people. Because you realize, okay, this is what's happening right now. I can't control everything. I certainly can't control other people. And so all I can do is respond in the best way possible. Yeah, that's all takes a lot of bitachon, a lot of faith and understanding that Hashem really does indeed run the world. The Ramban and the Ibn Ezra say, B'cholzos, and all of this, they said, it hadn't yet happened that he sinned with his lips. But of course, this is ominous. It's coming soon. Let me, just in the last couple of minutes, winding down, introduce the next figures who we will be spending some time with, and they're significant. As Mrs. Iyov goes away and never comes back, Iyov is visited by some friends. I'm just curious here. Has anybody cheated a little bit, which I'm encouraging you to do, and peeked ahead at the narrative? Do you know what's coming? Some of you have been through Iyov before. We're in for some heavy discussion, deeply philosophical, totally relevant to our lives, between Iyov and his friends. Let's consider, and my suggestion is you take some time and scan ahead and see what's coming in the books. You can look at it in depth, you can look at it briefly. The Pashup shot here, the simple reading of the text, they appear like one-dimensional simpletons as foils to Iyov. Iyov comes off, I think often, at least in the simple text, as being a man of great incisive thinking. They seem much less so. So, in fact, Chazal see them very differently. So when we come back, I'll try to talk about the discrepancy. Who are they? What do they represent? I'll give you this much. The Gemara Baba Basra tells us they're the poster boys, all of them. Iyov and Eliphaz and Bildad and so forth and Elihu. They're considered the role models, really without peer, in friendship. Chazal have a famous statement. O chavrusa, o misusa. Anybody remember who famously, those were his last words?
Rabbi Yochanan?
Nope. Some of us have visited his grave in the north of Eretz Yisrael. Gemara in Tainis.
Rabbi Kiva? Oh, Choni Yamago.
Eitan. You got the prize, right? Remember, because he comes back after the 70 years. He's the original Rip Van Winkle. And nobody will learn with him. Nobody believes he's choni, and so he's bereft, and in his sadness of not finding a chavrusa, he says, "O chavrusa, o misusa, give me friends or give me death." So the Gemara actually cites that about Iyov and his tight circle of friends. I'll elaborate on that, B'ezras Hashem, tomorrow. Any last thoughts or questions? How is this going? Just quick. I'm open to feedback. You're able to follow. It's too much. It's too little. I oversaturate you with ideas, or you're able to flow with it.
Zafaria has a bunch of midrashim also.
If you see things that I'm not mentioning, enlighten us. Yoel, please. I would love to have an enriched discussion here. So, yeah.
There's something that comes to mind. I'm just like the Malcolm, John 2:11, here the kilometers, stuff like that. Just brings up.
Okay. All right. As we go along, maybe tomorrow night you'll bring in something. You find something that's particularly meaningful.
Yeah, it's hard to focus on Zoom, the whole online.
It sure is. It sure is. We'll have to get over all the inherent drawbacks of this forum, and Baruch Hashem, we get to do this. All right. I'll stay on as usual, and the
Rabbi,
rest of you, nice to see you, and we'll see you tomorrow.
So
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Question.
Okay, pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. So I have an Iyov question. So when it came to the Malbim who says that Iyov's wife saw that if Iyov gave a bracha, bless Hashem, then Hashem's going to kill him. And if he cursed Hashem, then Hashem's going to kill him. Shouldn't you go towards the positive side, that if you're going to go out, at least go out right, instead of just, going out quickly? I don't know, does that make sense?
You said too much in it. I don't think I followed. What's your question?
Okay, so we mentioned when we mentioned Iyov's wife, we spoke about the Malbim and that that the Malbim interprets words as sarcastic and maybe I didn't get the right word there, almost heretical. But the Malbim understands Iyov's wife's understanding as if Iyov would bless Hashem again, then Hashem is going to kill him. And if Iyov cursed Hashem, Hashem is going to kill him. So instead of telling Iyov to curse Hashem, shouldn't she tell Iyov to bless Hashem? And therefore,
give the two options.
Right.
Well, I think she's maybe there. I think the implication, I mentioned this, but maybe not when I read that line, was that she's concerned about her own life at this stage. And maybe the safer bet would be, well, if you blaspheme, you're definitely going to go, and maybe I'll be spared.
All right.
It would be in keeping with the way we see her. She doesn't come off as a particularly virtuous person.
Right. We mentioned last year there's something similar that a person would kind of puts his arm against his head to even though the arm may be slashed. We spoke about one's children the same way. So is this like a similar concept of that take Iyov but spare me?
Sort of self-defense. I mean, he seems to be somehow incurring Hashem's wrath, so she doesn't want to go down with the boat.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
All right.
See you tomorrow.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, great.
It's more philosophical and theoretical. It's addressing your last point about like typical people in life and inconveniences in life and how you respond to that in a positive, effective way.
Yeah, such an important point.
Yeah, it is, and
consider if you master this, you'll be a tzaddik.
Yeah, I agree. So this is something I'm working on myself. I think I'm doing well in the aspect of not letting the inconvenience get to me. My question is, what's the proper view for, like, take a person, for example, a person that does something to you. Okay, like the act itself, I say, okay, like everything from Hashem comes with a tovah. It was supposed to happen this way. Nothing happens here unless decreed from Shemaim. Okay, the act I usually get over. What I'm struggling with and what I have a question about is how you view the person afterwards. Are you supposed to forgive them and have like a positive view towards them? Is it supposed to be like benevolent? Is it supposed to, like, are you allowed to have a negative view towards them? Because that's not being mad about the act. That's being mad about what's happening afterwards. Like, do you have any advice on that?
Sure. There's a lot to say, and a lot of it is case sensitive and it's individual. So we say in Kriya Shema Lamita, we go right before we go to sleep. We say this very difficult line that implies a very high level on our part. Shelo ye'anesh shum adam b'sibasi. Please Hashem, as you're reviewing everybody's merits and faults, please make it so that nobody gets punished because of me. Now, consider the mentality, because obviously there's a guy, if Hashem's going to punish them, then they deserve to be punished. That means they did something bad to me. I just am saying I don't want to be the cause of that. I don't need any divine vengeance. I don't want anything bad to happen to people. If somebody does something bad to me, it's not my fault. I mean, maybe it is my fault and I deserve it then, but I feel bad for the person. Maybe there's a backstory. Maybe they've got some traumas. People who really see Hashem in the world and have worked on themselves and are other directed, have that selflessness, have great compassion. And they're seeing, oh, this guy's misbehaving, but he must have any number of his own personal private problems, and I should maybe commiserate with him. That's one, again, maybe stratospherically high kind of reaction, but a correct one. And big tzaddikim achieve it. There's another possibility to consider, though. Obviously, there are a lot of different kinds of situations. There are some people who are evil and who do bad things to you, and they pose a threat to you, in which case you have to do whatever you need to do for self-defense, right? I mean, you could be a tzaddik, but not, you remember Gedalia ben Achikam, the Gemara faults him for excessive goodness, excessive faith. He says when his assassin lies to him, Yishmael ben Nesanya lies to him and says, oh, we need a place for Rosh Hashanah. Do you remember the story?
I don't.
Right? He sneaks into his house, he lies to him, and Gedalia is warned. Gedalia is told, hey, this guy, Yochanan ben Kareach, comes over and he tells him, you can read all about this in the book of Yirmiyahu, of Jeremiah, that he tells him, this guy's really got bad plans for you. You've got to take precautions. Gedalia's very innocent and honest kind of response, he says to the warner, Yochanan, he says, Sheker ata dover. You're lying, I don't believe you. And naively, he takes in his assassin, and that's it. He's assassinated, and many people there in his house, innocent people, are also taken down with him. And so Chazal learned a principle, michush miu miboy. You have to take precautions. Can't be foolish. So that's also part of this, right? As much as we're forgiving and loving and we want good things for people and don't punish anybody, Hashem, but neither should you enable evil people who might destroy you and everything that's good. The key, and really these ideas are not at odds with one another. One is simply pragmatic. The latter view is pragmatic. Just do what you need to do to stay alive or to defend yourself. But the general idea is that, I don't take it personally. I mean, who am I? And that's why we understand humility is such a high level value, because if you're genuinely humble, something that's hard to achieve, but if you're genuinely humble, I don't get any kicks from seeing people punished, certainly not on my behalf. And quite the contrary, if I look at, you have to train yourself, but if you look in any individual's eyes, you should see Tselem Elokim. They have a divine spark. They have some redeeming qualities, some virtues, and we try to find those.
So, like with that in mind, and with your last point, mostly, like I read in a book recently that you can never hate someone, or you can never I don't know about dislike, but you can never hate someone because everyone has a piece of Hashem in them, and so essentially, it's like you hate someone, it's like hating Hashem.
Let me qualify the last statement, because it's not. I don't think it's quite precise. Last week's Parsha Kedoshim, we just read Al tisna es achicha bevavecha, not to hate your neighbor in your heart. So you're right, we're not supposed to hate. Sometimes, though, you're supposed to use hate, and you're supposed to feel hate not for the person in total, but if anybody goes against Hashem or anything that's good, that's an emanation of Hashem, so you have to hate that too. Meaning, we don't make the mistake of the liberal-minded pluralist who loves everything and everybody equally. And the worst thing you could say about genocide is that you personally may not agree with it, not that it's wrong.
Right. So that's the issue with democracy.
Yeah, and in the worst extreme of liberal democracy, so that you'll hear people saying that, and that's also not correct.
So, but do I have to love this person? That's really, I guess, what my question is coming down to. If someone does something to me, okay, the act doesn't affect me. Do I have to love this person? Like, or is taking into account what you said, understanding is the circumstances that led to such an act. Do I have to like taking that into account, do I have to love that person, or can I just
Not
be satisfied?
necessarily. You can try to find their virtues and love their redeeming qualities. You can hate those qualities that they're going against Hashem. But both of those are sort of at an arm's distance, a little dispassionate, meaning I can pick out the good and leave the bad and understand that in some kind of calm, objective kind of a way. And again, I'm offended by anybody who goes against Hashem. I have a Dvar Torah that is coming out. Rabbi Altman recorded me in a Zoom thing. I have one for this Shabbos, but this is not the one. It's in a few Shabbos, it's now Parshas Naso, in which I'm going to be talking about, or I already talked about it, but you may only hear me saying it if you listen, on the positive quality of being a kanai, which is sometimes translated as a jealous or fanatical person. But in the positive iteration, what it means is somebody who's got such a refined being that when he encounters evil or ugliness or filth, he can't tolerate it. He's got to do something. He's got to rise up and either rebuke or correct or destroy. Uviarta harami kirbecha. Sometimes it's an option. You have to sometimes rise up. We're not absolute pacifists. In the face of evil, sometimes we have to rise up and destroy evil. This is one of the ways that Judaism contrasts Christianity, where we believe that the notion of giving, your enemy slaps your cheek, you give him the other cheek, is a foolish recipe for life. As much as we try to love people, try to give them benefit of the doubt for sure, but we're not naive about the potential for evil to destroy everything that's good.
I got you. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I have another meeting, but thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Appreciate your time.
Great questions. All right, fantastic. Great to see you. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.